Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. More than 1.8 million additional economic impact payments disbursed under the American Rescue Plan. Total payments reach nearly 167 million. IR 2021-119, May 26, 2021, Washington. Today, the Internal Revenue Service, the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and Bureau of the Fiscal Service announced they have disbursed more than 1.8 million economic impact payments under the American Rescue Plan. So we're on EIP 3, Economic Impact Payment 3. If you haven't received part of your payment thus far, maybe it went out in this 1.8 million additional economic impact payments. Let's read on. Today's announcement covering the most recent 2 weeks of the effort brings the total disbursed so far to nearly 167 million payments. They represent a total value of approximately $391 billion since these payments began rolling out to Americans in batches on March 12th. There's a link to March 12th if you want to follow the progress of this EIP 3. Here is additional information on the last 2 weeks of payments, which includes those with official payment dates through May 26th. So these are going to be some more details on the last payments that went out, so you might want to take a look at it and see if you fall into these categories if you're still looking into it. So in total, this includes more than 1.8 million payments with a value of more than $3.5 billion, more than 900,000 payments with a value of approximately $1.9 billion went to eligible individuals for whom the IRS previously did not have information to issue an economic impact payment, but who recently filed a tax return. So that's interesting because that's a significant amount of money that's still going out to people who apparently they didn't have the information to send the economic impact payment. And they've been trying to get this information for like 2 years now, because you would think if they qualified for EIP 1 and EIP 2, then they would qualify for EIP 3. And if they had the information for EIP 1 and 2, then they would have had the information for EIP 3. They haven't. They had to get the tax return in order to get it. That would be an indication that there are probably still people out there that haven't received their economic impact payments and would qualify for rounds 1, 2, and 3. If you know anybody that fits into that category, then you might want to get them or see if you can help them out to file the tax return for 2020, which is basically the remedy. The remedy generally including the economic impact payments round 1 and 2 calculated on the tax return in the form of the recovery rebate credit. EIP 3 not on the tax return, but the information could still be there and allow the IRS to then send out EIP 3. And if there's any other economic impact payments, then that they'll have that information for those payments as well. So this also includes additional ongoing supplemental payments for people who earlier this year received payments based on their 2019 tax returns, but are eligible for a new or larger payment based on their recently processed 2020 tax returns. This is probably a very common area that many people are in because the EIP 3 was based on 2020 if they had it, but if not, on 2019. Because it was fairly early in the year, many people didn't have the 2020 in and may still not have it in because it might be on extension. Therefore, they based it on 2019. Now, there could be a problem if there was an income limitation phase out. If your income goes above a certain threshold, the amount of the economic impact payment goes down. That's an issue because in 2019, it's quite likely that people's income was higher than 2020 when all the problems happened. And if that was the case, it's possible that they got a lower economic impact payment than they should have if it were based on the 2020 income. So the remedy for that, if you didn't get your full economic impact payment because they based it on 2019 data and your income was higher than the threshold at that point, but lower in 2020, is to file 2020 tax return, and that should provide the information for them to give what I think they're calling this a plus-up payment, the difference here. So in the last 2 weeks, there were more than 900,000 of these, quote, plus-up, end quote, payments with a value of more than $1.6 billion. In all, the IRS has made nearly 7 million of these supplemental payments this year. Overall, the last 2 weeks of payments contain more than 900,000 direct deposit payments with a total value of $1.6 billion, with the remainder as paper check payments. The IRS will continue to make economic impact payments on a weekly basis. So they're still going here. So apparently if you haven't got your EIP 3 They're still doing it. If you need a remedy, if you haven't got it because they don't have the information, typically the remedy for most situations at this point in time is to file the 2020 tax return. EIP3, Economic Impact Payment 3, will not be on the 2020 tax return, although EIP 1 and 2, remedies for that will actually be calculated in the form of the recovery rebate credit. But the EIP 3, them having it, will give them the information they need to process the round 3. And again, any other round that will go forward will probably be based on the same kind of prepayment type of method that we are well accustomed to at this point in time. So ongoing payments will be sent to eligible individuals for whom the IRS previously did not have information to issue a payment, but who recently filed a tax return, as well as people who qualify for the quote plus up end quote payments. Special reminder for those who don't normally file a tax return. Although payments are automatic for most people, the IRS continues to urge people who don't normally file a tax return and haven't received economic impact payments for a 2020 tax return to get all the benefits they're entitled to under the law, including tax credits such as the 2020 Recovery Rebate Credit, the Child Tax Credit, and the Earned Income Tax Credit. So if you haven't filed, or if you know somebody that still hasn't got their economic impact payments and they do not normally file, then it looks like they're still getting to a lot of people that hadn't filed the tax return. The IRS just didn't have their information, couldn't send out the economic impact payments. So likely there's a lot of people still out there that haven't filed and are in that situation as well. So if anybody hasn't received EIP 1, EIP 2, or EIP 3, the remedy is to file the 2020 tax return. Again, EIP 1 and 2 will be on it in the form of the recovery rebate credit. There's a link to that here if you want more information on that. EIP 3 will not be on the tax return, but the information will give the IRS the necessary data for them to process EIP 3 and any other EIPs after that point in time. Also note that if you know someone that's not filing, then because they're not required to, that does not mean that they might not be benefiting to file, not just because of the economic impact payments and related to recovery rebate credit, but also because there's these refundable credits that have been increased during this time as well. That includes the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. Software is typically free if your income is below a certain threshold, so you might as well check it out if you know someone that's not filing and they're not required to, and they say, I just don't want to deal with it. It might be worth checking out for 2020 and see if it would be beneficial, see if you qualify for these credits. And if you do, you find out it's actually worthwhile to do so, you might then want to take a look at prior years as well to see if you would have qualified for any kind of credits in the prior year as well. There's always money on the table that people don't, pick up that they would have gotten if they filed the tax return every year based on withholdings, as well as these kind of refundable credits that people haven't really picked up. So filing a 2020 tax return will also assist the IRS in determining whether someone is eligible for an advance payment of the 2021 child tax credit, which will begin to be disbursed this summer. So they made big changes to this child tax credit. They're going to do a similar type of thing. So hopefully, this is quite confusing normally, but it's becoming like a normal thing now. So maybe we'll get used to it. So they adjusted the 2021 child tax credit, which normally you wouldn't get until you file the tax return sometime in 2022. They made it basically refundable, and then they're gonna issue a prepayment based on that out into during 2021. So clearly, to know that, for the IRS to be able to do that, they have to have the basic information, including who's the dependent and where to send the check or where to send the payment information. So they need that as well for people to pick up that advanced child tax credit, which should be a larger amount and in advanced portions. So for example, some federal benefit recipients may need to file a 2020 tax return even if they don't usually file to provide information the IRS needs to send payments for a qualifying dependent. Eligible individuals in this group should file 2020 tax return as quickly as possible to be considered for an additional payment for qualifying dependents. People who don't normally file a tax return and don't receive federal benefits may qualify for these economic impact payments. This includes those experiencing homelessness, the rural poor, and others. Individuals who didn't get a first or second round economic impact payment or got less than the full amounts may be eligible for the 2020 recovery rebate credit, but they'll need to file the 2020 tax return. So whether it be round 1, round 2, round 3, whether it be that you didn't get any of the credit or you got a partial credit, the remedy most of the time is to file the 2020 tax return. It'll be a little bit different, as I stated a few times here, related to round 1 and 2 versus round 3. But again, usually the remedy here being file the 2020 tax return. If it's because you didn't have a dependent, for example, you got a lesser amount than you would have given the fact that the IRS didn't have enough information to pick up a dependent, for example, then file the 2020 tax return, tell them you have a dependent, and they should be able to adjust that one as well. Like the other adjustments, the round 1 and round 2 in that situation would be calculated with the recovery rebate credit, the difference. And round 3, again, the IRS should then be able to pick that up and hopefully able to then adjust round 3 payment. See the special section on irs.gov claiming the 2020 recovery rebate credit if you aren't required to file a tax return. There's a link to that here. The tax return preparation is available for qualifying people, so you can take a look at the free tax preparation information here. And then the IRS reminds taxpayers that the income levels in the third round of economic impact payments have changed. This means that some people won't be eligible for the third payment even if they've received a first or second economic impact payment or claimed a 2020 recovery rebate credit. Payment will begin to be reduced for individuals making $75,000 or above in adjusted gross income, or $150,000 for married filing jointly. So we phase out after that income threshold. The payments end at $80,000, so past $80,000 for individuals, you won't have the EIP3, or $160,000 if married filing jointly. People with adjusted gross income above these levels are ineligible for a payment. Individuals can check the Get My Payment tool on irs.gov to see the payment status of these payments. There's a link to that here. Additional information on economic impact payments is available on irs.gov. There's a link to these items here. There'll be a link to this in the description.